Elon Musk might usually come across as a bit of an out-of-his-depth dweeb. But in an interview with the BBC's James Clayton, there was at least one exchange where he came out on top.
We have spoken to people who have been sacked that used to be in content moderation, and we've spoken to people very recently who were involved in moderation, and they just say there's not enough people to police this stuff, particularly around hate speech in the company. Is that
what hate speech are you talking about? I mean, you use Twitter,
right?
Do you see a rise in hate speech?
I mean,
but just a personal anecdote, like what do you? I don't.
Personally, my For You, I would see I get more of that kind of content, yeah, personally. But I'm not going to talk to the rest of for the rest of Twitter.
So you see more hate speech personally?
I would say I would see more hateful content in that.
Content you don't like or hateful? What do you mean to describe a hateful thing?
Yeah, I mean, just content that will solicit a reaction, something that may include something that is slightly racist or slightly sexist, those kinds of things.
So you think if something is slightly sexist, it should be banned?
No.
Is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying anything. I'm
just curious. I'm trying to understand what you mean by hateful content. And I'm asking for specific examples. And you just said that if something is slightly sexist, that's hateful content. Does that mean that it should be banned?
Well, you've asked me whether my feed, whether it's got less or more. I'd say it's got slightly more.
That's why I'm asking for examples. Can you name one example?
I honestly don't use. Honestly, I
don't. You
don't.
Can't name a single example.
I'll tell you why. Because I don't actually use that For You feed anymore. Because I just don't particularly like it.
But you said
actually, a lot of people are quite similar. I only look at
hang on
my
a second.
following.
You said you've seen more hateful content, but you can't name a single example, not even one.
I'm not sure I've used that feed for the last 3 or 4 weeks. And
then how did you see that hateful content?
Because I've been using Twitter since you've taken it over for the last 6 months.
Okay, so then you must have at some point seen the For You hateful content. I'm asking for one example.
Right.
And you can't give a single one.
And I'm saying
I say, sir, that you don't know what you're talking about.
Really?
Yes, because you can't give me a single example of hateful content, not even one tweet. And yet you claimed that the hateful content was high.
Well,
that's a false.
No, what I claimed.
You just lied.
What I claimed was there are many organizations that say that kind of information is on the rise. Now, whether it has on my feed or not, I mean, right, and
literally can't name
something
one.
like the Strategic Dialogue Institute in the UK, they will say that. So
look, people will say all sorts of nonsense. I'm literally asking for a single example, and you can't name one.
Right, and as I already said, I don't use that feed. But
then how would you know that?
I don't think this is getting anywhere.
You literally said you experienced more hateful content, and then couldn't name a single example.
Right, and as I said,
that's absurd.
I haven't actually looked at that feed.
Then how would you know there's hateful content?
Because I'm saying that's what I saw a few weeks ago. I can't give you an exact example. Let's move on. We only have a certain amount of time.
Wow, that was the moment he fucked up. I'm seeing in my For You feed lots more hateful content. And then he says, give me an example. Actually, I don't use my For You feed. And I haven't used it for weeks. Dahlia, I mean, in that guy's defense, apparently he got very short notice to do the interview. I'm sure he was a bit terrified. The most high-profile interview he's done in his life. But that was bad, wasn't it?
That was excruciating in many ways. And I think that had he, I don't know, had the time or, had the expertise, I think a lot of people who work in, content moderation or whatever will have watched that and been like, you had a golden opportunity to really put to Elon Musk the problems that are going on in Twitter, and you just fumbled it. So it was excruciating. It's not as much of a win for Elon Musk as I think it's being made out to be, because I think if your entire argument that what's happening on Twitter is fine is resting on the idea that you can't come up with a concrete example of hate speech on the platform, it's going to fall apart pretty quickly, even though not in that interview. But I mean, come on, it's ask any public or any Black woman or woman of color with a mildly prominent profile, and she'll tell you there is hate speech on the platform. But I think that this raises a lot of really complicated questions, because Twitter is quite unique as a platform, more so than any other social media platform, I would say. It operates in a way that is quite similar now to a public utility. This is not just a platform where people keep in touch with their friends. It's not just a platform where people even, buy things. It is a platform that is used by governments to communicate with electorates, with the public. And the breadth of power as a communications infrastructure is unlike anything we've seen before. And the question of content moderation in that context is a really tricky one. I don't actually have an answer to who should content moderate, how should content moderation take place, and what does it mean to moderate content or curate content on such a platform. You can't have a complete free for all because that's not how these platforms work. There is algorithmic curation. That is a fact. The question is, to what ends and under whose control? That is a really important question that I think journalists need to be educated in and need to be able to engage in and to spark that. I wish we spent more time talking about that rather than, talking about tofu eating wokarats and whatever it is that fills our airwaves these days. It's a genuine question for our generation. But what I do know is that the fact that these decisions are being held and are being made by a single individual who is, clearly having some kind of insecurity issues and is trying to win a popularity contest on, some kind of Reddit, like subreddit or, on 4chan, that is a serious crisis for our public sphere. And, it is, but I do think that it is a genuinely tricky question. And I wish that, the one time that we're actually getting to talk about this, that it didn't happen in such a clownish way, because it is genuinely something that I don't have an answer to. And I would love to see more people who are more able to, in an educated and reasonable way, have that conversation rather than having an argument about whether or not hate speech exists on Twitter, which obviously it does. And as we've learned from Elon Musk, being in charge, owning Twitter, the people who curate and make those decisions at the top really shape how that platform gets used and how it is experienced and the impact that it has on public culture.
Elon Musk shouldn't celebrate too much, because if his defense, as you say, of Twitter is that you can't prove the receipts. I mean, people can prove the receipts. James Clayton just wasn't particularly well prepared to do so. I mean, potentially because he's a white guy working at BBC, right? If this had been you or Ash or anyone, they could have, I'm sure you could have gone through your Twitter mentions and showed him some of them. I mean, my message request is now just full of constantly fake bot women asking me to show them around various cities. This did not happen before Elon Musk owned Twitter. Very, very strange. It does seem like it's a badly managed organization. Also, in terms of the receipts, in terms of the data, if James Clayton had more time to get his notes together, he might have come armed with this study. It's from a New York Times report published last December. Before Elon Musk bought Twitter, slurs against Black Americans showed up on the social media service an average of 1,282 times a day. After the billionaire became Twitter's owner, they jumped to 3,876 times a day. Slurs against gay men appeared on Twitter 2,500 times a day on average before Mr. Musk took over. Afterwards, their use rose to almost 4,000 times a day. An anti-Semitic post referring to Jews or Judaism soared more than 61% in the 2 weeks after Mr. Musk acquired the sites. That's a pretty quick change. Those figures are according to research from the Anti-Defamation League in the US and the Center for Countering Digital Hate. Again, you might say, what do they define as hate speech? You'd have to look on the website. I'm sure they provide some receipts. You might also think maybe it got better since then. Elon Musk has owned the site for a while. Well, it doesn't seem to have done. Last month, the Washington Post examined a study using machine learning, very impressive, to monitor anti-Semitic content. It reported this. The analysis found an average of over 6,200 posts per week appearing to contain anti-Semitic language between June the 1st and October the 27th, the day Musk completed his $44 billion deal to buy Twitter. But that figure rose to over 12,000 through early February, a 105% increase. So those are the numbers going up that you don't want to see. Value of Twitter going down, hate speech going up. The rise in hate speech on the platform may also have some real consequences for Musk. Germany, for example, which has pretty strict laws on hate speech, as well as other speech acts like denying the Holocaust. Well, last week, Germany's Federal Office for Justice, the BFJ, not sure what that stands for in German, launched proceedings against Twitter, threatening it with a 50 million euro fine for failing to deal with content that's illegal in the country. Germany's Minister for Justice told Forbes this. Numerous content was reported to the BFJ that was published on Twitter, which the authority considers illegal, and despite user complaints, was not deleted or blocked by the provider within the legally stipulated periods. The fine proceedings initiated are based on this. The internet is not a legal vacuum. Platforms must not simply accept it when their services are misused to disseminate criminal content. Now, I imagine that the German Federal Office for Justice will not accept a poo emoji as Elon Musk's response, which seems to be what he keeps messaging to journalists whenever they have questions. Although in that 3-minute clip, he did get the better of the BBC's James Clayton.